As a vegan, I don't like to cause unnecessary suffering to sentient beings, and you've all been sitting in these chairs for a long time. But the basic idea is that animal agriculture, and we have to understand this very clearly, is the most devastating thing we're doing to our environment. The problem with animal agriculture is that it's very inefficient and wasteful of resources. It takes enormous quantities of land and water and petroleum and other resources and creates an enormous amount of pollution. For example, right now we're cutting down nearly a hectare of rainforest in the Amazon basin, and the driving for every single second. My gosh, every second, and the driving force behind that is people eating meat, dairy products, and eggs. We're cutting down the forest to grow soybeans, which are then fed to imprisoned pigs and cows, chickens, and also fishes. And so the meat that comes from this is purchased by people in China, in Europe, in North America, and it's causing the loss of species and genetic diversity. Also, these forests are the lungs of the earth, and they're also critical for climate stability. And yet with animal agriculture, we're attacking and killing not just the animals, but also wildlife and ecosystems at the same time. Scientists estimate that anyone who moves to a plant-based diet every year saves over 100 trees. So moving to a plant-based way of living is the greatest gift we can give to our earth and to future generations. We're also overfishing the oceans so severely that scientists say that the oceans will be dead in another 25 to 30 years if we continue this way. The reason we slaughter so many fishes is because we're not just eating them directly, we're also feeding them to imprisoned cows, pigs, and chickens, and other fishes. In fact, scientists now estimate that the numbers of fishes we're killing every year is in the trillions. That if these fish every year that we catch, if we put them end to end, they would reach all the way from the earth to the sun. How can we human beings be so destructive, and how can we tolerate living in a society that is so destructive? When we destroy the oceans, when we destroy the rainforest, when we destroy the water under the earth, the aquifers, and we destroy our climate, then how can we live healthy lives on this earth? We're finding more and more problems with our earth because animal agriculture simply transforms healthy plant-based foods into harmful foods. Saturated fat, cholesterol, and animal protein that is acidifying and inflammatory. And also enormous quantities of sewage, which is very toxic, as well as methane and nitrous oxide, which are very powerful greenhouse gases. And it's all completely unnecessary. So the wonderful good news is that as we move toward a plant-based diet, humanity can help all of the ecosystems heal. The more we become vegans, the more the rainforest can heal, the oceans can heal, the rivers and aquifers, the air, the soil, everything, and wildlife can have habitat again. So animal agriculture is not only the most devastating thing by far that we're doing to the earth, it's also the most devastating thing we do to the health of our society. War and conflict and disease are the things that really harm us, and injustice. Animal agriculture is the driving force behind all of these things. But we don't see it, we don't talk about it, it's invisible. The industries don't want to think about it, and the people eating animal foods also don't want to think about it. But it's essential that we make an effort to understand these ideas and share them with others. For example, every year we grow enough food to feed 10 billion people. This is well understood, and yet we keep hearing that there's not enough food to feed everybody. It's not true. We're growing more than enough food to feed everyone because we only have about 7.5 billion people. And yet roughly 1 billion of other human beings, our brothers and sisters, are chronically hungry and starving. And it's well understood that these food shortages are the driving force behind the chronic conflict that we have, the wars, and the refugees, and so much violence. And yet animal agriculture is injustice against animals, against wildlife, against ecosystems, against hungry people. Again, the good news is that as we move to a plant-based diet, not only can we heal our earth, we can also heal our society. We can create a foundation for peace and harmony and freedom and equality. It's completely available. There's nothing stopping us except this habit of eating animal foods. And so we live on an abundant and beautiful earth. How many of you have actually noticed how beautiful the earth is? Here in Taiwan, just seeing the oceans, the streams, the mountains, the flowers, the trees, that understanding and that appreciation, I think, helps us to yearn to protect this beautiful earth. And also human beings, we are very beautiful also. And yet we live in a society where we harm each other, and it's primarily because of animal agriculture. We're raised in a society where we're taught that we have to compete with each other and use animals and use the earth. For example, if I take out my wallet and pay for meat, dairy products, and eggs, someone somewhere has to have a job where all they do all day is stab animals or beat them. And so these workers in the slaughterhouses and the factory farms have the highest rates of suicide and drug addiction, alcoholism, and injuries. And so when we move to a plant-based diet, we're showing compassion to the workers also, and also to our own physical bodies, because we're not designed to deal with or eat animal-based foods. Our bodies can deal with many different foods, but it's chronically difficult to eat animal foods. Everywhere we see, as people eat more and more meat and dairy products and eggs, the levels of cancer and heart disease and diabetes and obesity all go up. And this sickness is very hard on people, although it does make profits for a few large corporations. And so the basic idea to remember is that all of us, human beings, have been given a precious gift. All of us have been given the gift of a physical body that we can use to celebrate our lives here on this beautiful earth that needs no animal to suffer to get all the nutrients that we need to be healthy. And yet all of us have been born into a society where from the time we're little infants, we're compelled to participate in these meal time rituals where we reject this gift. Every day with every meal we're taught to reject this wonderful gift and stab and kill animals anyway, and it's completely unnecessary. And the animals suffer terribly, but they don't retaliate against us. They just suffer. But we don't realize that our violence towards these animals always retaliates. Our violence itself retaliates. It comes back as physical diseases, as psychological disease, as cultural disease, as war. Animal-based foods are not really foods, they're actually violence. And so when we eat a more plant-based way of eating, we get all the nutrients that we need to be healthy, and also our mind and heart come into harmony. So the thing to remember is that we're designed to thrive, to be happy, to be healthy, to celebrate our lives on this beautiful and abundant earth. Key to happiness and a future for us as human beings is to question these stories that we hear that we have to kill and abuse animals to be healthy. And then finally, I just want to talk about the basic idea that not only is animal agriculture destroying the outer world, but also our inner world. So we're not just eating foods that are not in our best interest, we're eating attitudes that are harmful to us. So for example, every meal, if we have animal foods, we're eating a mentality of disconnectedness. The basic message in every meal is don't make connections. Don't make the connection between what's on your plate and what it took to get it onto your plate. Just stay shallow, don't look deeply, don't feel deeply, don't question anything. But what veganism is essentially is making connections, looking deeply and feeling and listening deeply. And scientists understand actually that the ability to make connections is actually what intelligence is. Eating animal foods not only reduces our intelligence, but it reduces the intelligence of our entire society.